Hey everyone, my name is Morten and welcome to my gaming cave. In today's video, we're going to learn how to play Twilight Inscription, which is promised to be an epic role and writing experience. So let's get started. The Leysax Empire has fallen after a petty and tragic conflict, and the remaining factions have retreated back into their homeworlds to lick their wounds. But now, after some dark years, every faction once again looks upon the stars with an ambition to be the next emperor of a galactic civilization. And you are the leader of one of those factions. To become the next emperor of the galaxy, you need to be the player with the most victory points after up to 25 event cards have been played. And how can you score those victory points? You can do so in various ways. For instance, by completing objectives like these, exploring the galaxy and see if you can find some relics, or maybe you can even find a planet called Megator Rex and take that, and that will also give you victory points. But now that we know what the game is about and how to win it, let's set it up. First, you hand out 4 player sheets to each player, and there are 4 different ones. The first one is the navigation sheet with an overview of the galaxy. Then we have the expansion sheet where we take a closer look at each of the planets in the galaxy. Then we have the industry sheet where we are down on the planet. This is where we develop our economy and our influence. And lastly, we have the warfare sheet where we get to both produce and deploy our spaceships. The next thing you do is that you hand out 3 faction sheets to each player, and then they get to choose one of them and put the other 2 back into the game box. Next, each player will need an asset reference sheet where all the assets are explained briefly, and they are on both sides, and they will also need a pen. And these are all the components each player need to play the game. Now you find the Megator Rex sheet here, and there are also 2 sides on this. So if you are only 1 or 2 players, you will play with this side facing up, because down here there will be an AI player to make the game a little more challenging. But in this example here, we will be 3 human players, so I'll put it down this side facing up. The next thing I do is that I shuffle the relics deck and place it near Megator Rex. And these relics are also collected on the navigation sheet, but I will come back to that a little later. But you really want these are good. During the game, we will also have an agenda phase. There will be one during stage 2 of the game, during stage 3, and during stage 4. But we will only need 1 agenda for each stage. So I'll select 1, and I'll put the remaining ones back into the game box. And now we get into the heart of the game, and that is the event deck here, and that needs to be set up properly. But there are events for stage 1, stage 2, stage 3, 4, and 5. And I will show you how to set this up correctly so that you get the best experience. When you prepare the event deck, you divide it into 10 piles, divided by stage numbers and colors. And when you want to construct the combined stack, then you make sure that in each stage you start with a blue one at the bottom, and then you alternate between a black one and a blue one. Like this, and then you make sure to put stage 1 on top of stage 2 and so forth all the way down to stage 5. And now the event deck is ready to be used. Now you take the objectives deck and note here that there are 4 different kinds of objectives, 1 for each of the faction sheets here. So we have warfare, I'll just take the first one, but you should take them randomly, industry, expansion, and navigation. And note here that there are 2 sides on these cards as well. One side has 2 numbers down here with how many victory points a player will score when they fulfill the objectives. So make sure to place them so the side with the 2 numbers are facing up, because the first player to score this objective will score 5 victory points, and every subsequent player will only score 3 victory points. So whenever that happens, then you flip it so that we can see that the first player have already scored it, and now the remaining players will only get 3 victory points for scoring this objective. Now we need to determine who becomes speaker. The speaker does not gain any benefits from being it, but they will have a few extra tasks during the game. so it is recommended that the most experienced player becomes speaker. So in this case, it will of course be me. And this is how the full setup for a 3-player game should look like. And the first task for the speaker is to flip the first event card. And that is a strategy phase. And now we are almost ready to play. We just need to know what resources are and how we get even more of them. Resources are needed to develop your faction and score victory points. And all resources are collected equally across all the players. And that happens during the strategy event phase. First, all the players will get the resources printed on the card. And then the speaker will roll the 2 sets of dice here. First we have the black ones that are unlocked for all the players from the beginning of the game. And they of course also contain resources. And then we have the colored ones called focus dice that needs to be unlocked individually by each player. But by doing so, then you will have access to even more resources. And there are 3 kinds of them. First we have the red material resource, then we have the blue influence and the green research resource. And how you spend the resources is entirely up to you. But the player with the best strategy and a little bit of luck will win the game. If you don't already own the game, then I have added a link to a webshop in the description below. And if you buy the game through that link, then you will support this channel at no extra cost for you. Now it's finally time to see how the game is actually played. And I have placed the 4 player sheets according to the rulebook. So I have navigation, expansion, industry and warfare here. And I have decided to play it with the B side facing up. So if you own the game, then you can easily recreate this setup and play along with me at home. And then we have stacked the event card deck as described in the rulebook. And if you have done the same thing, then you will have 4 strategy events in the beginning of the game. And we also have 4 player sheets. And I will use each of the 4 strategy phases on each of these sheets and go into details on each of them, how you actually use them. But I don't recommend that you do this in a real game. Instead, I would focus on 2 or maybe 3 of the player sheets and dedicate my resources there. We have previously already flipped the first strategy card phase here. And what it says on the card is choose active sheet. So we will take navigation and spend this card's resources, which are these 3. Then the next step is to roll the dice here and spend the resources on the dice. So how do we spend this card's resources? That we can see up here with the legend. So with the red material resource and the green research resource, then we can explore one adjacent system. So if we take a closer look at the galaxy here, we can see we have a home system with a circle around it. And then we have 3 lines going out from that. And these lines indicate parts of the galaxy that has been explored. So if we want to use the red material resource, then we can draw 1 additional line here. And I'm actually deliberately going towards Megatol Rex. So now I've spent the red resource. Then we can see with the blue influence resource that we can claim 1 explored system. And we can claim systems that have orange lines connected to it. And in this example here, we want to go for this planet because we will need it in the next strategy phase. So make sure to do that at home if you play it along with me. And the way to claim a system is to circle around it with our orange pen here. And as you can see, there is a dashed line around here, and that means that we can spend this asset whenever we want to. But a lot of the other systems, like these commodities here, and we'll go more into details with that when we get to the industry sheet, but you can see they have a dotted line around it, and that means that we get to use those assets immediately. But now we have used the first 2 resources, and then I will use the green one to explore to an empty system here. So now we have planets that we unlock on the expansion sheet. Then we have commodities, which are the colored red, blue and yellow ones. They are used on the industry sheet. Then we have this icon here that indicates if when we claim a system like this, then we get to draw 1 relic card. And in this example here, it is a nanoforge that will give us a benefit we can use once, and then we will get 4 victory points. So if we get this one, then we can write 4 here when we claim the system. Simply to remember that we get those 4 extra victory points. But what we also got is our faction icon out here. And whenever we claim this system, then we get to use the second ability on our faction sheet. So with the Embers of Muad, we get to use our Starforge faction ability, which is to deploy a prototype Warzone, and we do so out on the warfare sheet. But I will come back to that later in the video. Then we have some systems that simply contains more victory points. They are of course always good to have. And then we have this icon here and this icon here. When or if we claim these, then we will get +1 to the combat value against our neighbor to the right and our neighbor to the left. And lastly, we have the wormholes. So whenever we explore all the way to a wormhole, then we can use the gravity drive technology if we decide to research it, and then we can continue researching at the other end of another wormhole. And there are small parts of the galaxy that are only accessible through the wormholes. But I'll get back to technology later in the video. But now we have spent the 3 resources on the card. Now the speaker rolls the dice. Oh, we got 3 red ones here, and we also roll the colored ones, even though we haven't unlocked any of those yet. But now we get to explore 3 more systems, so we will do that. 1, 2, and 3. And I am working my way towards Megator Rex, because when we get to claim that system, then we can put our name here on the Megator Rex sheet, and the first player to reach this planet will get 7 victory points and 4 additional vote, and then any subsequent player will get a little less. So getting there first is a good thing. And that was it for the navigation sheet and the first round of the strategy phase. Then the speaker flips the next event card, and the next game round begins. And it is a strategy phase, of course, but this time we will choose the expansion sheet as the active sheet. But before spending the 3 resources here, I want to spend this planet first, and I do so by crossing it over. Remember, it has had a dashed line around it, and that means that we can use it whenever we want on the active sheet, and this is the active sheet now. So I can use this planet to either unlock one of these 6 planets we have here, or we can use it to unlock one of the space docks down here. And by unlocking space docks, we get access to the focus die. So let's just say that we want to unlock this hazardous planet up here. So I've crossed it out here and I made a tick here to indicate that this is now unlocked. And now I can spend the 3 resources shown here, and I do so by crossing out the corresponding icon on the planet. And whenever I have crossed out all the resources in a row or in a column, then we get access to the assets surrounding the planet. And there are multiple different assets here. First we have a yellow tech skip, and then we have a green tech skip, and they can be used to unlock technology on any of the sheets when we get access to those. Then we have a population increase icon here, and it has a dotted line around it, and that means that we get to claim one of the victory points here on the population tracker. And as you can see, you can score quite many victory points by doing so. Then we have this speech bubble with a head underneath, and if we get access to this asset, then we can unlock it down here on the industry sheet so that we get more votes during the council phase. Lastly, we have more commodities, and they are also used down here on the industry sheet. But I don't want to do this in this example, so I will cross this out. And then I will spend the planet on unlocking one of the focus die. And we do so by either spending a planet or the corresponding resources. So in this example, I want to unlock the red focus die. But I don't want to use it on this sheet, but we have to assign it to one of the 4 sheets before we are allowed to use the red one. And I can spoil immediately that I want to use it down here on the warfare sheet. So when I choose this as the active sheet, then I will make a line here, but I'll show that in a minute. Now I want to spend the resources on the card here. And since I don't have any unlocked planets up here, I cannot use them here. So instead I will cross out 3 resources on this space dock so that I can unlock the green focus die a little later in the game. Now it's time for the speaker to roll the dice, so I'll do that. But I cannot use the focus die, and this time I'm really unlucky because I got 3 influence resources, but I have already unlocked this focus die. And that was it for the expansion sheet. Now we continue with the third strategy phase. So we start with flipping the next event card, and this time we choose the industry player sheet as the active one, and then we can use these two influence resources on it. But first, let me quickly walk you through it. First off, we have the industry grid up here, and that unlocks a lot of assets for us. Many of those are commodities, and they can be used down here on the industry chart to unlock more trade goods, but also to unlock more votes during the council phase. Then we have the trade goods out here that indicates how many we have, and we can use trade goods as either resources whenever we want, and any of the three types that exist, or we could get 1 victory point for every 2 trade goods we have at the end of the game. And lastly, when we reach the council phase, the first thing we do is that we count how many votes we have unlocked here, and then we can claim those votes in this chart here so that we know how many votes we have for the agenda. But it all starts here on the industry grid, and we need to use these 2 influence resources, and we can use those to claim 1 unmarked space adjacent to a scrapped space. And we always start here at the orange cross, and a cross indicates that this space has been scrapped. So now we can claim any surrounding assets. So I'll claim this one here and this one here. And since they are dotted, that means that we can use these assets immediately. So I will cross out these 2 yellow assets down here. We always start from the left and go right. And whenever we have claimed all the commodities in a column above the trade goods sign down here, then we can mark it as unlocked. So when the production event card is flipped, then we can claim those trade goods here in this trade good chart. So we don't do it immediately. The next thing we do is that we roll the dice. And here we get to scrap 2 assets and claim 1 more. And the thing is, to be able to claim an asset, it has to be adjacent to a scrapped asset. So that means that we cannot claim any of these 2 red commodities. So instead, I will use 1 resource to scrap this asset here, and that will give us access to this speech bubble down here. So I will claim that by using this resource. So now we have this one left, and it is dotted, and that means that we get to draw a line down here so that we now will get 2 votes when we reach the council phase. And then I will scrap 1 more resource. I will scrap this one up here, because then the next time we activate the industry sheet, then we will have 5 commodities we can potentially claim. And that's the end of the third round. And now we reach the fourth and final strategy phase before something exciting will happen here. First of all, we will choose the warfare sheet as the last one. And this is the sheet where we prepare ourselves for conflict against our immediate neighbors to the right and to the left. And we do so by producing the units we have available out here. An unlimited number of infantry, 4 PDSs, 4 cruisers, 4 dreadnoughts, and only 2 war sons, unless indicated otherwise. For instance, the Embers of Muad can also produce prototype war sons, and those don't count against the war sons shown here. But before spending this green research resource, I will claim the red focus die, so I'll cross it out here and underline in here so I remember I can use the red focus die on this sheet. And now I'm ready to use this green resource, and I will do that to produce 1 infantry. And the way you do it is that you draw it out here above this line on this grid. So I'll deploy 1 infantry here. So now my combat value against my neighbor to the right is 1, and it's still 0 against the neighbor to my left. But now let's roll first the black dice and then the focus dice. And we were lucky there because we got a double resource on that side. And I will use the first 3 of these resources to produce 1 cruiser. And I do so by crossing out the resources. And we also get a victory point for deploying 1 of those. And now we need to draw a cruiser out here on either the left side or the right side. Just remember, it has to touch this line or 1 of your other units. So this time I will draw a vertical one here, because it can both be horizontal and vertical. And now our combat value against our neighbor to the left is 1, 2, and 3. And it's still 1 against our neighbor to the right. But we could deploy 2 more infantry by doing this and this. And now it's 3 against both of our neighbors. And if we win the war against those neighbors, or just one of them, then we can claim the resource up here. And if we lose against them, then we will lose 1 victory point. And that was it for the warfare card. So now the exciting part happens, and see what comes next. So now we are as prepared as we can get, and the next card in the event deck will not be a strategy card. So let's see what we get. Ooh, border conflict, war. Advance the deployment line. Then resolve a war against each neighbor using the sections immediately below the deployment line. So what does that mean? If we take a closer look at our warfare sheet here, then the orange line is our deployment line, and when we advance it, we move it up here. And then we use the units down here to resolve the war against each of our neighbors. And they of course also need to advance their deployment lines. So let's see how strong we are against our neighbor to the left. And we have deployed 1 cruiser here, and it has a combat strength of 1, 2, and 3. And on the other side, towards our right neighbor, we have deployed 3 infantry, 1, 2, and 3. So we have a combat strength of 3 against each of our neighbors. So if we take a closer look at our neighbor to our right, we can see he has only deployed 2 infantry. And that means that he is not as strong as we are, so he loses the war and lose 1 victory point, and we win the war and gain 1 planet asset. And with our neighbor to the left, we can see that he has deployed a PDS, and you can see that on the structure here. So he has a combat strength of 1, 2, 3, and 4. And that means that he is stronger than we are. So in this case, he wins a planet and we lose a victory point. And this is how the war is resolved. Then the next time we choose the warfare sheet as our active sheet during a strategy phase, then we need to deploy our units in the sections up here, where the first one of course is still adjacent to the deployment line, but we can also prepare for later stages as long as our following units still are adjacent to a unit we have already deployed. So if you want to make sure that you win, for instance, a blue focus die up here, then you could already in stage 2 start preparing for the war in stage 3. The third type of event that can occur during the game is extremely simple because it is the production step, and this represents the economic might of each faction. All you need to do is to look at your industry sheet and claim an equal number of trade goods as you have unlocked on that sheet. And that's it. Then you move on to the next phase. The next event will be a strategy phase. We'll skip that. And then the last event card in stage 2 is, in this example, a council phase. And what it says is, claim 1 vote on industry for each unlocked +1 vote icon in your industry chart. Then flip and vote on the stage 2 agenda. So we grab the industry chart here, and we have 2 + 1 votes unlocked, and that means that we can circle 2 votes out here on the vote chart. So we have a total of 4 votes on this agenda if we choose to use all of them. Then I grab the stage 2 agenda card, flip it over, and then we can see it's a technology embargo, and we have a pass and a fail. But now all the players debate whether they want to pass this or fail this. And then ultimately, in secret, they decide how many of the votes they want to use on this agenda. So let's just say that we want to use 3 of the 4 votes, and we don't really need the technology on pass. So I take off the pass icon and keep it secret for the other players. And when everybody has put down their pen, then the speaker, starting with the player to their left, start counting how many votes are for and how many votes are against. And then he writes down the totals on the Megator Rex sheet. And when we know what outcome has got the most votes, then each player resolves that outcome. And lastly, each player crosses out the number of votes that they have used. So I saved 1 for the next agenda, and then we can erase this, so we are ready for the next council phase. And now we are ready to move on to stage 3 in the game. Initially, I skipped talking about the technologies on the player sheets, and as you can see, there are 2 of them on each of the sheets. And when you research these, then they will give you a benefit on the exact same sheet as they are printed on. And there are 2 ways you can research technology. The first one is to spend either a tech specialty like the red one here, or spend 3 green resources. But note that there are 2 different kinds of technologies. There are the ones that you can use multiple times every time you select a sheet as the active one, and then there are others that you can only use once every time you choose a sheet as the active one. So make sure to check out all 8 technologies and see if any of them can help you score some victory points. During setup of the game, each player has picked a faction to play. And on the faction card here, there are 2 printed abilities. The first one is available for the player throughout the entire game, and you can use it as described here. But there are also some factions that have a setup step that you need to complete before beginning the game. Then below the blue line, there is a second ability, and to use that, then you need to claim the faction ability icon here on any of the player sheets. But make sure to do that because this ability is much stronger than the first one. And also double check against the objectives that you can score, because some of these abilities will help you tremendously towards scoring any of these objectives. And remember, if you get to score it first, you get more victory points than the other players. And speaking of objectives, we revealed 4 of these during setup of the game, and there is one dedicated to each of the 4 player sheets. So whenever you are in the strategy phase and you start allocating resources of any of the sheets, make sure to check against the objective and see if you get any closer to scoring these, because they will require an effort to get, but they are definitely worth it in victory points. The last way you can gain more victory points is by claiming either one or both of the relic systems here, because when you claim one of them, you will get a relic from this deck, and that will give you 2 things. First of all, you will get some victory points as stated at the bottom part of it, but you will also get this powerful ability that you can use once. And if you're lucky, then that ability matches your overall strategy. But that is not always the case, and then you just get something that you can use, but not necessarily needed. Well, except for the victory points. You always need victory points. The game ends when the A Throne for the Taking war event card is being drawn and the last war has been resolved. Then each player counts all the victory points on all 4 of the sheets here and write them in this field on each of the sheets, and remember to include any victory points scored by completing objectives. Then you have 4 subtotals that you add together, and then you tell the final result to the speaker so that he can write it down in the final score column on the Megatol Rex sheet. And the player with the most victory points wins the game. Now I'll give you some final tips, and the first one is to remember to unlock the focus dice, because that will give you access to extra resources during the game, so the sooner you unlock them, the more resources you will have available. Then we have technology specialties. They are also pretty good, especially if you want to research technology, but also if you want to get access to more of the more valuable resources on the industry sheet. And 2 of them are also required if you want to produce dreadnoughts and warsons on the warfare sheet. So as you can hear, there are several ways to score victory points, and the fun part of this game is to figure out an optimal way to get as many resources and thereby as many victory points as possible. And with that said, thank you for watching. You can support the channel by clicking on the Patreon link in the description below. And if you don't already own the Twilight Inscription game, then there are also a few affiliate links in the description below where you can buy the game at no extra cost for you, but you will support the channel a little bit by doing so. So thank you for watching, and I hope I'll see you in the next one.